laws are very powerful, and they show everybody in society what the country thinks is important. You're showing them that voting, driving, being able to do things for yourself legally without operating with your parents or your guardians. Very important. You must wait till you're 18. But you're saying what you do with your body at 16 is not important?
Hello, podcast listeners. Welcome to our third and final episode on sexual health, education, and culture right here on Grassroots Radio. I am your host, Unique Bird, and my guest this week is Jahnelle Teague, who is a law student completing her studies at the Norman Manley Law School in Jamaica. As a young woman and future legal luminary, Zoe shares her perspectives on how our laws can shape our sexual habits and beliefs. I also feel the need to issue a bit of a content warning on this one because we do talk about some pretty heavy topics as well as sharing some personal experiences on the negative end of the sexual interaction spectrum. If you would rather not hear any of that, tread lightly through this episode or, skip it completely. But I think it was still important for us to talk about these things and not shy away from these topics because our silence is a big part of why these issues persist the way that they do. I will catch y'all next week for the beginning of our series on conscious entertainment. This sex thing has been a bit of a heavy topic, so we're going on the lighter side of things next. So stick around for that. Until then, enjoy the episode. Be sure to let us know what you think on social media. And here is Zoë Teague to tell you who she is.
I am Jahnelle Zoë Teague. I am a final year law student at the Norman Manley Law School. I am a 23-year-old who is very passionate about the law, social change, helping others, and entrepreneurship. I'm also the proud owner of two businesses, Profile268, which is in Antigua, and ProfileMona, which is based here in Jamaica, where I study.
So you're currently in Jamaica studying law, and this is something that you've had a passion for a long time. Can you kind of tell me how did you decide that law is what you wanted to pursue?
Sure, that's actually a funny story. I'm very talkative, and in your family, when you're talkative and you're outspoken and you're argumentative, everybody says, "Oh, you should be a lawyer."
Mm-hmm.
But when I was graduating from primary school, they made us do this thing where we got up on stage and said what we'd be when we're adults. And I got up on the stage and I said, "I'm gonna be a lawyer. I'm gonna be a Queen's Counsel." So I guess you could say it's always been something I've been interested in from childhood.
Mm-hmm.
But as I was in high school, I was trying to navigate different spaces because I wasn't sure. I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. But as fate would have it, that is where I ended up when I really got into thinking about my future, like fourth form, fifth form. The subjects I chose were geared towards law. When I got to the Antigua State College, the same subjects again I chose were geared towards law. So when it became time to choose something for university, my mind was already made up. Mm-hmm. It was gonna be law. I was going to UE to do law.
So you've been on that track for a long time.
Basically.
Yeah. Is there a particular aspect of the legal field that you're more focused on? It's a really big area.
At first, I wasn't sure. I really thought about maybe human rights, but now I'm in law school and we're doing the more practical side of things. I'm going into prosecuting and seeing where that takes me. That would be working with the government in terms of instead of being a defense lawyer, the criminal as going into the prosecuting persons on the other side, which would be for the government.
Right. So you'd be on the Crown side, kind of going after the criminals.
Yes.
Is there a particular reason why you decided to go in that direction?
What we've been doing a lot of at law school is we do a lot of practical exercises. And as you said, the law is very diverse. So I could go into an area where we haven't really got much specific training, but one of the courses I loved last year was criminal law. And also, when you go into that field, it's more trial advocacy, which is litigation, speaking in court. And I genuinely enjoy all of that. I'm actually on a team for my school for a trial advocacy competition that's coming up next week in the Bahamas. I love the courtroom. It really brings me joy to do all of that, to see how those things come together.
That's beautiful that you're able to align your career with something that makes you so happy and brings you so much joy.
That's something I was very concerned about,
Mm-hmm.
especially when I was in university. I wasn't sure I said, okay, yes, I'm doing this law thing and I've always wanted to do it, but now I'm here. Do I really want to do this? And I don't intend to be in law forever, but I think at least to start, I have a good sense of where I want to be and where I belong, at least to start.
And so today we're talking about sex and the legal aspects of that topic. So can you kind of introduce to us why this topic is of particular interest to you?
So for me, sex cuts across all areas of our society, as well as so does the law. And the law helps to shape our society. So when I think about sex in the context of how our laws and how we operate in that sphere go together, I'm very interested. I think about, for me, human rights, and a lot of atrocities occur within the space of sexual sex and sexual activity, and just a deeper understanding. I am a young woman, and sex is something that we talk about in a lot of spheres, but we don't really consider the implications of it. And I've had my own personal positive and negative experiences with sex. So it's something that really is personal to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the reasons I'm so very interested in sex and how it operates in our society and our laws.
Right. You made a great point about how our law shaped our society, and sex is something that cuts across so many different aspects of our lives. So can you illustrate, I guess, some of the legal challenges as it pertains to like the laws that we have on books and how they could be potentially shaping challenges in our society in terms of how we relate to each other around sex?
So the first thing that comes to my mind when you ask that question would
Mm-hmm.
have to be the burglary laws.
Right.
And those laws are criminalizing sexual activity, and it's not specific to gender, but it affects man, woman, and anybody who identifies as anything else. But when you look at prisons, and we know our prison is heavily populated by men, they are engaging in sexual activity with each other. Because our laws on the books say that burglary is illegal, you can't provide these men in prison with condoms. Something as simple as that, where realistically their sexual health is important, and the transmission of diseases is something that you would want to keep to a minimum. You can't even do that because your laws preclude you in such a simple way, a subtle but simple way, and we don't think about those wider implications. And without looking at prison, the reality is people are homosexual, and so therefore you're not being able to properly educate people, to properly talk to not even homosexual, but people who engage in a variety of different activities. We know that there are men who identify as men, who have sex with men. You want to properly, yes, there are doctors and there are people who are educating and doing their part, but our laws are literally stopping institutions from properly dealing with these issues and to educate, because that's illegal. It doesn't make sense to me. Additionally, something that it's not exactly sex, but it is sex. The the age of consent, and also the age of consent is 16. You can have sex, but you can't vote. So you can, yes, you can make that decision, but you can't vote. So because sex is a big decision, and then we look at, again, laws influence society. So because yes, we have 16 on the books, but then I don't think people who are, and this now goes into education for me. You allow teenagers to have sex. You say, yes, this is legal, but you're not properly equipping them with the sexual education tools to make wise sexual decisions.
Yeah, that's totally where I was going to go next, even in terms of the buggery laws, because you have these things on the books that preclude you from making certain institutional decisions. And one of those would be what kinds of topics are allowed to be taught in schools.
Mhm.
And even in the other conversations I've had for this sex health series, people have brought up the fact that homophobia is actually taught in our schools. Like you will hear from your teachers that being gay is wrong and you shouldn't do it, the end. And there isn't really much room there for expansion.
Exactly. And so the teachers are saying that homophobia is being taught in our schools, and the laws are also saying that. So when you turn to the laws, which, as I said, shape our society, you can't expect any better. Because
Mhm.
yes, you can change the mind of the people, but literally your laws say, your laws are very powerful, and they show everybody in society where the country is going, where what the country thinks is important. For example, we made recently, and I'm not gonna get it 100% right, but I do know we recently made the we increased the fines for people who were caught using their cell phones while driving. That shows that this is a big deal. It shows
Mhm.
that the country is taking a stand. So people know that's important. We changed our laws when it came to plastic and styrofoam. That shows where the country is taking a stand. It shows this is the mindset that we are trying to shape. If we don't change our laws in relation to sex, in specific areas, it's not going to change the mindset of the people, because as far as they're concerned, why would I even be concerned with that? If the law say it wrong, I've heard people in Antigua say, well, upon the books that it not ever come off.
Right. Which, I mean, historically, people have been complaining about these laws for a long time. And now internationally, it's a bit of a scandal that we still have these laws on our books. I remember even a coworker of mine here in Canada, you know, a white woman, whatever, she works as a travel writer. And they were
Mhm.
planning this big conference, and Barbados was the place that they wanted to go. Someone found out that Barbados still has buggery laws on the books, and so it became a huge thing within their organization. And they're like, well, we can't go there because we can't support a country that still has these archaic laws. And like, how are our gay coworkers going to feel if they have to go to this place, right? So it's not even just about us internally and what it means, but there's also international implications, especially for countries that are so
Reliance
dependent.
on
Yeah.
tourism. I totally agree with you on that point, and it's something that I don't really know if our leaders are even taking into consideration. I remember last, that wasn't last summer, maybe 2 summers ago, when there were rainbow flags up for Carnival,
Yep.
not anything to do with LGBTQ, but simply some decorations, and the way people behaved as though this was an outrage. The government has to lead. That is why people put governments in place. But I think another issue with this, with that and changing of the laws on governments and lobbying, is that governments are so concerned in our region with getting back in power for 5 years, another 5 years consistently. If they feel as though changing those laws in that way would affect them getting back in power, they're willing to take a back seat on something that is a serious issue and something that affects all of us, because I want to be in power in 5 years. But the governments have to lead. And as you said, in the international sphere of it all, when are we gonna catch up? And these laws are not even laws that are Antiguan. These are laws that were imposed on us.
That's a really excellent point about the imposition of these laws, because let's face it, when we first became a nation of laws and all this, it wasn't us as, Black people, descendants of Africans, who sat down and came up with these things. They were sort of handed over to us, and it was up to us from that point forward to mold them into something that makes sense for our societies. And I think in a lot of cases, that molding process has just kind of become stagnant in certain areas.
I agree. And that's a wider issue that I personally, as a young person who is in the legal field, has an issue with, because our laws, change in our laws moves very slowly. We've never had a constitutional amendment since we've been independent. And to me, that's a very big issue.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole other conversation. Going back to the point about laws being imposed on us, and you're right, these laws are supposed to change and we're supposed to flesh them out. But I see a big issue all the time where I feel as though we're comfortable. And I mean, I don't work in the Attorney General's office. I'm not a legislative drafter, so I don't know what are the hiccups that they may be experiencing. But I would love to see more change, faster, proactive change where our laws are concerned, especially under the Sexual Offences Act. I mean, kind of straying away, we have a very comprehensive not straying away, we have a very comprehensive Electronic Crimes Act, which deals with revenge porn, which deals with child pornography. So we are seeing some changes, but things could obviously be moving a bit faster as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it seems kind of like technology is one of those areas where you're kind of forced to move quickly. But then when it comes to being outside of that, there's a bit more of a resistance or struggle or something. I was reminded of this quote by, I think it was Andrew Breitbart, who said, politics is downstream from culture. So if you have a culture where homosexuality is accepted, and another big thing, like you touched on the consent laws, is that if it's culturally acceptable to have sex with teenagers as an adult or to be homophobic, just generally, then it becomes much harder for the politicians to take action on those things. What would your response be to that conceptualization?
I agree, because, and like, as I said earlier, that is one of the things that preclude our politicians from changing the laws, because the pervasive culture is, I have to get back 5 years. I need to win the election. I have to get back another 5 years, even though, I've only been in power for 3 years, which is Antigua. So because I'm always in this constant election cycle, we are always, and this is a regional thing I've noticed as well, we are always in an election cycle, which means that sometimes issues that may be controversial and are hot topics, but really could push a vast majority against you, politicians are afraid to do. Things that may shake things up in the country, they're afraid to do because I want to win the next election.
So you had mentioned the consent laws a little bit earlier, and let's dive into that a little bit. Like, what do you see as the problems emerging from, like you pointed out, this dichotomy between you can give consent at the age of 16, however, you have to wait until you're 18 to vote. So it's like in the sexual arena, you're an adult at 16, but as far as making decisions about your country, you have to wait another 2 years before you're considered an adult. What problems do you see emerging from that split?
Well, first and foremost, adults, grown men and women, who are simply waiting, sometimes they're not, but simply waiting and grooming young people for when they're 16 to finally engage in sexual activity with them. And as I said, right, the reality is some of them are not waiting, but there are some who are literally waiting for somebody's birthday to their 16th birthday for them to finally engage legally in a sexual act with them. And that has to be an issue for me. Young people, yes, as I said, they're going to think about sex. We are sexual beings at our core. That's something I believe. But we're not really explaining to young people, I think. You're showing them that voting, driving, being able to do things for yourself legally without operating with your parents or your guardians. Very important. You must wait till you're 18. But you're saying what you do with your body at 16 is not important. It's not a big decision. It's a very major decision. I don't think that we're properly preparing young people for that. The sexual education programs we have, if we have any in school, they're subpar. But then the laws say, okay, 16, go ahead, do what you want. You're not showing young people that maybe this is something I should think about more deep on a deeper level, because nobody thinks that you're old enough to drive a car by yourself. You need to have somebody who's had their license for 5 years in a car with you at 16 years old to drive. But to engage in an act which has such great implications in terms of pregnancy, diseases, and just sex is a very powerful act overall. Go ahead, 16, doesn't matter. We're not
Right.
stopping you now. Nobody can tell you anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's not right.
It's really interesting Caribbean culture because we have this kind of puritanical ideal about a lot of things that we have codified into law. And then when you come down to the cultural level and look at what actually happens, it's anything but that puritanical standard.
It is, and it's interesting that you said that, because I don't think I've ever looked at it that way. But for example, we have, as you said, 16 is we're talking about 16 is the age of consent, but we talk about abstinence from sex and homophobia and all of that. But you're gonna tell a 16-year-old abstain, but you tell me, oh, I should tell them to abstain, but then the laws tell them, yes, it's okay. What are you talking about, really?
Yeah.
Because to my mind, the law says do it, but you're gonna tell me, oh, abstain, sex is bad. But y'all literally have codified on the law that once I'm 16, I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
That don't
And
add
then
up to
also
me.
you have this like the cultural side of it, which people will go around saying things like after 12 is lunch.
I hate that saying. And as I said, I've had negative and positive experiences with sex. And as a young woman growing up in the Antiguan society, men don't care.
They really don't.
Men do not care. And I know of circumstances, because we talk about women a lot, and females a lot, girls, women. But boys and men are also very susceptible, but in ways that sometimes you don't see. I know young men, adults now, who would have told me, Zoe, older women have troubled me and have done things to me. My first sexual experience, it was not consensual.
Yeah.
But this again goes back to our laws, Jenny, because men can't be raped.
Right. That's a big one.
Because the act literally speaks to a penis entering a vagina, penetration in that way. So we can't even protect men and boys who may be raped in that society if our laws say that they can't be raped. Because these things happen when men or a young boy goes to say, I was raped, who's gonna help them? The laws don't actually reflect that that is a thing. So police is looking at it, oh, how you as a man get raped?
So even if it was an act of homosexual rape, because the law has defined it as a penis entering a vagina, even in that more extreme situation, a man cannot claim that he was raped under the law.
He can't claim that he was raped.
That's horrifying.
He can say he was buggered, but he cannot say he was raped.
That needs to be fixed, right? Because rape isn't...
It's not black and white.
It's not black and white. It's not unique to one gender. And it should be defined in terms of consent rather than a particular act.
But additionally, as you said, it should be defined in terms of consent. The other tricky issue with that is when you literally swallow, it has to be a penis into a vagina. A woman for example, can be raped. In other societies, she could be raped because a man used a sexual toy on her without her consent.
Right.
But in our society, it would have to be sexual assault or something else. So it fits into a lesser offense
Mm-hmm.
than rape. So you are precluding persons from being able to access justice
Yeah.
because the book and justice in the best way possible in some instances, because our laws do not accurately reflect the range of things that a person can experience. And laws, as I said, they cut across society, so they properly need to address the issues in society.
Let's talk a little bit about sentencing. 'Cause you just mentioned, okay, so there's rape, which is probably like the highest level, but then
Mhm.
there's also sexual assault, and then there's things like um, indecent,
Decent assault,
yeah, or unlawful carnal knowledge,
yes.
things of that nature. So, how does sentencing work? Like, what are the approximate punishments associated with these different levels of sexual crimes?
Well, Yannick, I would have to double check, but just
Mhm.
going back before I go forward, a man can't rape his wife. So there are nuances to it, but a man cannot rape his wife per se. So there are certain nuances. For example, he would have committed sexual assault, but it wouldn't be rape.
Okay, so sexual assault is possible within the confines of a marriage, but not rape.
Yes, but there are certain things that need to be included. For example, they would have been needed to have been divorced, and divorced under the law. There needs to be a separation agreement in place.
In
So, do,
order for you to
for
claim that you were sexually assaulted by a spouse,
yes, and not a spouse, a husband
a husband, right?
to a wife, because
Hmm.
it doesn't flip on the other side.
So basically, if you marry someone in this context, you're giving them unlimited consent to do whatever they want to do to you. That's basically it, right? It's like you got a blank check to do anything you need to do to me,
Yeah,
and I can't say anything about it unless we happen to be divorced. And even in that case, it can't be a rape, even though you full on would have committed that act.
it would be
It's
sexual
sexual
assault.
assault.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's got to go.
indeed. Um, So I'm here, I'm looking at the Sexual Offences Act.
Okay, let me
Granted, there
pull it.
have been some amendments.
How recently?
2004, if my memory serves correctly. I don't have that amended act with me, but I do have the one from 1995. So, for example, we have, as I was telling you about sexual assault, we have rape, which is a male person commits the offense of rape when he has sexual intercourse with a female person who is not his wife
Hmm.
without her consent, where he knows that she does not consent to the intercourse, or he's reckless as to whether she consents to it, or with her consent, where the consent is extorted by threats or fear of bodily harm to her or to another, or the consent is obtained by impersonating her husband, or the consent is obtained by false and fraudulent representations as to the nature of the act. So, for that charge of rape, the man is liable on conviction to imprisonment for life. But so we talked about husband who commits the offense of sexual assault. He's only liable on conviction to imprisonment for 15 years. Look at that disparity.
Right. So it goes from life all the way down to
So just
15
15
years.
years.
Wow.
So what are we talking about here? That doesn't
Mm.
make sense. We have now, I'm going to use sex with a person under a certain age to show you another disparity. Where a male person has sexual intercourse with a female person who is under the age of 14 years, he is guilty of an offense, and that man is liable on conviction to imprisonment for life. However, where a male person has sexual intercourse with a female person who is not his wife with her consent and who has attained the age of 14 years, but has not yet attained the age of 16 years, he is only guilty of an offense, and only he's guilty of an offense, but he's only liable on conviction to imprisonment for 10 years.
Whoa. So between the ages of 14 to 16, it goes down to 10 years from life if you're under 14.
Yes. And
Yikes.
for a woman, where a female adult has sexual intercourse with a male person who is not her husband and who is under the age of 16 years, she is guilty of an offense. Whether or not the male has consented, she's only liable on conviction to imprisonment for 7 years.
So it's somehow less harmful when it's being done to a male.
A young boy. That's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
Now, as I said, just so that I'm clear, there could be changes that have been made to the Sexual Offences Act, and I may not be quoting properly,
Right.
but that's 1995, and the amendment was made in 2004. So yes, that's 16 years. So maybe we have seen changes. I'm aware of that, but realistically, these things are in 1995 to 2020. These things are still in the mindsets of a lot of people. Like, oh well, the law don't even really consider a young man to be a big deal. 7 years, okay, we will do that for you. That you will hear conversations like that.
Ugh.
Nobody gonna find out.
Right. Because there's also this culture of silence around these issues. And when we think about how frequently these things happen and go unreported and go untalked about, how is that playing into like the psychological aspect of our people? Like if you have people who are carrying this kind of weight with them and they can't talk about it and they can't express it and nobody knows, it's still affecting your life. It's still affecting how you relate to other people sexually. We know that people who are abused are more likely than people who are not abused to go on to be abusers. Like not everyone will follow that track, but
the risk is there.
The risk is there and the behavior is contagious.
So when I say this is very personal for me, I would have experienced sexual violence in my life already, and I'm not 100% comfortable talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who listens to this podcast, but I know some people, but I don't know who all listens to it. But for example, maybe now my whole entire family will know or whatever, but for a very long time, the people closest to me did not know.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt very ashamed. Sometimes I think, oh wow, I'm damaged, I'm broken. Granted, I know I am not, but you have those feelings, but then you also feel like there's a shame in it because because our society says to keep it quiet, you feel ashamed, but you don't really feel that there are people you can talk to, and it's not as simple as, oh, just say something. It should be, but it doesn't feel that way. It feels very heavy, and if our society doesn't accurately reflect that, and I've not me, but I've known of people who have said, my uncle did something to me, and their family covered it up because they rather than, and you seeing your family cover up something like that,
mm-hmm.
it does things to you.
Mm-hmm.
It turn you into an abuser yourself, but it also shows you that the people around me don't care. The people in my community don't care. I know of people in communities where, for example, they all know that, let's say Mr. John, I'm calling a random name. Mr. John is, he love little girls or whatever, or boys even. And people will send their children, like, what did you say? Oh, it's nothing. I just sent you over there to get something. And that's what their parents are saying. What does that tell the child who knows realistically, my mother sent me over there, my father sent me over there because Mr. John maybe has money. And so when I go over there, my mother's getting something for that. That doesn't sit well with that person who would have been abused. And we really feel like, as for me, I know I felt as though it was like my shame. I should be ashamed But I really should not be ashamed that somebody decided to violate me as a person. But that is what I initially felt. Now, granted, my mother, she was she she never blamed me or anything. And when I told her, she said to me, why didn't you tell me sooner?
Mm-hmm.
But what about people whose families are telling you to be quiet about it? And you don't feel as though the justice system is going to properly deal with your situation, or you're not going to get justice. Because what this, like, think about it. We think about I read to you, a female will get 7 years. She's going to get 7 years, and she might not get the full 7 years, because there are things like, mitigation when it comes to sentencing. So if she's been on remand for 2 years, that's 2 years that are going to come off for actual sentence. Good behavior. She's a first time offender. These things count.
Yeah, so you
So
can do something like that and theoretically not get very much jail time, or get like a year, or get 18 months, or get time served or something like that.
exactly. And it's not only that, but realistically, how does that make the victim feel?
Yeah.
But also, when somebody commits a sexual offense, how are we really trying to engage that person in terms of understanding what the level of what they've done, the danger that causes, the way that affects somebody forever? Because being a victim of sexual violence, it never leaves you.
Yep. And I just wanted to say, like, I'm so sorry that you had to have that experience. Like, I'm really so sorry. And I appreciate, the courage that you've taken in sharing it on this podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add to, like, I've been a victim of sexual violence as well. Like, I have an incident that happened when I was a minor, and then, others throughout the years. And you're so correct in saying that it never leaves you, especially when you have a family that responds with silence or telling you to be silent about it. That you carry that forever.
You do, and I'm so sorry as well that you would have went through that. And I think, Yanni, just a similar point. Um, I had my most negative experience as a minor as well, but
Mm-hmm.
there's so many ways. As I speak as a woman, I can't speak to the male experience, but ways in which we are sexually assaulted verbally, or everyday microaggressions that we may face, that we don't even, sometimes we're so desensitized to it. I remember I was like 15, and I was walking on Market Street. I can't ever forget.
Mm-hmm.
I was walking on Market Street, and I had on a low cut top. It wasn't too low, but yes, you could see the tops of my breasts. And a man, I've never seen this man in my life, but this man said to me, passing, it's very, I won't even say, but he made some derogatory comments. And it wouldn't have been the first time you would have heard men make comments. I would have heard men make certain comments to me. But I don't know why in particular that stands out to me. It always stands out to me because I was just walking on the road, and it was so lewd.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't believe, and other people heard, and nobody said anything to this
Yeah,
man.
nothing for it.
Nobody. Another experience, and just this is how normal these things are in our society, is I was 11, yes, and my mom sent me to go to the shop to buy her something. I was by my aunt, and so there I go to the shop, and on the corner, a group of men. Some I knew one of the men, because it's a neighborhood my mom is familiar with. So I maybe knew one of the men, but a group of men. And one man kept calling out to me and I was scared. I didn't answer. So I was hoping when I came back from the shop that they weren't there. He was still there, but I didn't answer. And then he made a comment, well, if I ever catch you, the things I do to you.
Wow.
And so I went home and I told my mom. My mom jumped in her car and she went up the road looking for him. She said, show me the one who said something to you. And this man, when they had the confrontation, my mother said she doesn't know the man because it's an area where my family would have come from. He knew my mother though, and he knew who I was.
Mm-hmm.
He said to my mother, that I trouble your daughter because y'all think y'all are better than people.
Wow.
We went to the police that night. And the police came with us looking for the guy, but the people in the neighborhood had already alerted him that the police were looking for him. And so nobody could find him. For about a whole weekend, the police kept going back. They couldn't find him.
So the community response is to protect the guy.
Yes.
See, that's just awful. And this is the kind of culture that we need to move away from as quickly as possible. We needed to be moving away from this 20 years ago.
This shouldn't be a conversation that you and I as young people should be having, Yanni. This is something that we should be looking at things like this and saying we're so glad we're past that. And that's why I think one of the reasons I want to prosecute in terms of helping vulnerable people.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully, if I do go into that sphere, maybe making a difference in terms of trying to lobby for change in our laws, especially our sexual laws.
Yeah, I think we need to get to a point where even this kind of harassment on the street, because I don't think there's any young woman who can say they grew up in Antigua and didn't receive this at some point. I think it's a universal experience.
Universal, and I talk to young men and from all walks of society, and some of them don't even understand what they're doing. Because I've had a young man say to me, "But Zoe, I'm just telling her she looks pretty. I think she looks nice, so why can't I just tell her?" But we need to have more conversations, and we need to about that. But the laws also need to reflect that some of these nasty things because some of y'all are saying good afternoon, Mr. Look pretty, but some of y'all are saying some nasty, disgusting things to people you do not even know, and sometimes people you do know who are just trying to go about their day. That y'all need the law to come down on you, because the law is supposed to be a deterrent. It is going to deter you, or it's going to punish you, because some of this y'all are disgusting. Those words should not be uttered. First of all, why are you thinking those things? And second of all, you shouldn't be uttering those words to people just randomly on the street.
Yeah.
Or harassing people in their WhatsApp. Things like that.
Yeah, it's atrocious. It really is atrocious.
So again, that's another way I see the law needing to step in and address an issue, because it is an issue.
There's this statistic that often gets flung around when we're talking about any kind of sexual abuse, sexual assault that happens towards, again, kind of talking about the women's experience, because these are the numbers that we have kind of globally. And I think this might be an American stat, but it's 1 in 4 young women are in some way sexually assaulted or harassed before adulthood. And I wonder, what that statistic would be for Antigua or for the Caribbean. Do you know if these kind of stats are collected anywhere, either locally or regionally?
So I know gender affairs would try to do stuff like this. When I was working I was living in Barbuda for university, I was an intern. First of all, I volunteered with an organization and I became an intern with them, a local non-profit foundation for young girls called I Am a Girl Barbuda. And so similar things happen across the region, but I had a very unique opportunity to work with UN Women, which they have an office in Barbados. And it's 1 in 3 based on the statistics they were using And additionally, because we talk about the silence around it, whenever we talk about that 1 in 3 statistic, what would compass was show it's probably not. It's probably far worse than 1 in 3. And really, how much, when you think about it's far worse, is that you're saying, is it everyone? Is it one in
Right.
two? Because 3 is ridiculous. But because it's so much, it's a secret, and we have such a secretive society, we don't know. I can speak amongst my, friend circles and conversations I would have had with young women in different spheres, school, work, internships. Vast majority of women I know have had some sexual violence, assault, experienced it in some way. And sometimes you have women, girls who don't even realize. See, having a conversation, when they say,
Right.
wow, I didn't even realize that.
That was wrong, or something was
Or,
strange about it.
yeah, or wait, I just internalized and didn't even realize that that thing happened to me. Or you forget. I had one friend, we were talking one time, and we're talking kind of, she said, Zoe, she literally had like a wake up call. She said, oh my God. And I was like, what's the matter? She said, when I was a child, and she explained what happened. And she said, I did not remember that until this conversation.
Mm-hmm. And that can happen. That's a very common way that
Repre-
your mind
Repressing
will
of
deal with it.
memory.
Yeah. Yeah.
So imagine that 1 in 3 statistic. I always say I don't believe it, but I'm so scared when I say that, because what 1 in 3 is horrible. So what am
Mm-hmm.
I saying? What are we saying if that is not if that's not accurate? What is it? Is it everybody? And if it's everybody, we already have a bad issue. But if it's everybody, what are we gonna do about it?
Yeah. What are we going to do about it? And like, we have to do something about it. We can't just let this continue.
We can't. And then when you think about men and boys, we don't even have proper statistics because we don't even pay much attention to that.
Yeah. We've defined the problem in a way that leaves them out completely. They can't be raped, right?
Yep. Also, okay, it should be women are going to jail for this, but we make it seem as though, yeah, you lost your virginity at 12. Great. You're a man. You have men in society who are encouraging their young sons to get involved in this, their younger cousins. So your manhood is defined by this. So you don't even realize something is wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You
we have a
have,
lot of work to do on this front.
mhm, I
And
agree.
yeah, and so I'm happy that, bright young people like you are stepping up and talking about it and making a commitment to going into the field out there in the world and start to, advocate for a change and actually actively create that change. I think it's really admirable that you've made this a thing that you want to take on.
Thank you, firstly, but it's very scary when I think about, the trajectory of where my career may or may not go. Sometimes I'm so scared at the
Hmm.
idea of the things I'm going to see and hear.
That's part of the reason why people stay so silent and shy away from the problem is we're all afraid of the reality of it. And it's only by like acknowledging the fear and just moving past it that we're ever going to see any difference.
Yeah, totally. I agree with you 100%. One of the things that I think about is I know what I would have experienced, and I would want to know that somebody, if I could think about, I would want to know that somebody's out there working in a way, or I want to be a part of a change, so that somebody who may go through something I went through, or worse or lesser, but there's a system where people are actively working for that or to fix the issues.
Thank you so much for sharing everything that you did and elucidating these issues in a way that I find was very reasonable, very measured. And because you have personal experience with the issues that you're talking about, it's also like highly relatable. So I really appreciate you doing all of that. So for anyone who has listened to this entire conversation and is curious about following your work and your trajectory as it unfolds, where would be the best place for them to do so?
You can follow me on Instagram, Zoe.Mercedes, like the car, Zoe.Mercedes. I think there's a dot. Actually, wow, it's not. Yes, there is a dot. Zoe.Mercedes. And on Instagram, Talking Teague, which is my last name. So talking because I talk a lot, and Teague, Tague. Thank
And
you so much, Yannick, for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I love what New Grassroots is doing, and so I'm glad I'm a part of this opportunity and this movement.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Grassroots Radio. If you enjoyed the conversation, show some love and help spread the word. You can do that by subscribing on Apple, Google, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Already subscribed? Consider leaving a 5-star review. It helps other people find the show. If you have an idea for someone you want to see featured or a topic you want us to cover, let us know. DM us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at grassrootsanu or email us at thenewgrassroots@gmail.com. For more about NGR, visit us at thenewgrassroots.com. Until next time, this is Grassroots Radio.